Hey everyone, today we're going to continue with custom GPTs and link a custom GPT-4 to a third-party API. Let's explore one of the featured GPTs, whimsical diagrams. This is newly featured, and this will demonstrate a third-party API being utilized. So when I click here, kind of open up this custom GPT, and I'm gonna say what our plan is for the video today. So firstly, it's to create a custom GPT, comma. Secondly, it's to integrate a third-party API to the custom GPT. And thirdly, we're going to test the custom GPT and talk about other considerations and tips that might be helpful. So now we've done that, just submit that. And whimsical diagrams is going to go to its API and create a diagram for us. So firstly, it kind of illustrates what it thinks the process is going to be, and then generate a flowchart. So here we're now interacting. This starting action is interacting with the third-party API. We'll see we get prompted to, if we're happy for ChatGPT to interact with the whimsical.com API, and we allow that. And we get a link to view or edit the diagram in Whimsical, and this is the diagram it's created. So this has kind of been interesting. So we create custom GPT, integration plan, develop the integration, do some testing, which is a loop, deploy it, and it's kind of extrapolated on what we said. But this is an interesting way where we've gone from that initial GPT, which is just kind of generating text or images, to now generating a flowchart in a third-party software, in this case called Whimsical. All right, so that kind of demonstrates it, and we can see what was sent here. We can get a bit into the data by double clicking on this arrow. So now we've seen what an interaction with a third-party API can do, in that case generating diagrams. Why don't we go and create our own GPT that can have similar interactions with a third-party service? So I'm just going to hit create here, and I like to start off with the base template using the GPT builder. So what would I like to make? Well, I'd like to make a GPT that uses a third-party API to find and tell jokes. So we're going to go through setting up the GPT here in the GPT builder. Let's just call it the Jokester. And we can see that the GPT builder is kind of pre-populating the preview window on the right-hand side with the prompts. Let me just switch off the camera for a second. So you got jokes safe for work, find knock knock joke, etc., etc. Do I like it? Sure, it's great. And so we go through these initial steps to kind of, with the builder, to get our profile picture and everything. So I'm gonna now leave the builder here, because we're getting into what types of jokes should it prioritize, and actually we're wanting to use a third-party API. You know, if I ask it to tell me a dad joke at the moment, ChatGPT is going to generate this joke itself using GPT-4. But what we want to do is use an API. Interesting, we're creating an image here for a dad joke. We'll come back to this in a second. So what we're going to use today is this joke API. Someone's gone out of their way to create joke API, which is a API that doesn't require us to log in, but when we query it, it will send us back a joke. And so an example of this is here in this joke, this JSON of a joke, and we see here we got the joke that's a pun. I'm reading a book about anti-gravity. It's impossible to put down. And we see we've got these different attributes about flags of the joke, if it's safe or not, which language it's in, etc., etc. So this is what the API is going to be returning us, and every time we go to this URL, we get a new joke. So that kind of gives us an idea of what we're expecting from the API. Relatively simple. There are some customizations we can do to it that will show us how the API works. There's got documentation here. But if we go to try it out, we can see that we can blacklist not safe for work, religious jokes, political, racist, sexist, or explicit jokes, and we can select categories. And if we want the joke to just be a single statement or two-part. So this kind of gives us an example of what will be returned if we specify this. We can interact with the API manually. The Jokester has decided to create images for us with World's Best Dad for some reason to emphasize the quality of the dad joke. Why don't skeletons fight each other? Because they don't have the guts. All right. So now we're going to head to configure, because we now want to use our third-party API, which so far we've not even been asked for, despite saying at the start of the GPT that's what we want to do. So we head to configure and we go down here. Pass the prompts, pass knowledge, which could be, we could have a list of jokes here. That's another way to approach this. I'm going to turn off the image generation and the web browsing, so we won't get any more pictures of dads. And what we're really interested in here is action. So we're going to create a new action. We don't need authentication for the joke API, but in order to have ChatGPT interact with the API, it needs to know how to structure its requests for jokes. So we can kind of see examples of different schemas here for weather, or just use the kind of blank template here to understand how this gets put together. It's a bit of a manual process to do, but luckily we have this Actions GPT help that will help us to construct this schema for the API. So we're gonna go to Actions GPT, and I found the most reliable way to do it is to go to the documentation itself. So here we have the URL parameters. This basically tells us how to change our requests and how to request certain types of jokes, etc., and do the blacklists or request a particular language. So I'm just going to scroll down through this, and we've got these endpoints here. See here we've got like get joke. That's going to be an important one. That's what we're all about. There's also a way to submit jokes. So I'm just going to go to the bottom here where the API and how to interact with it is documented. I'm going to just drop this in here. Oops. And tap enter. So now we're getting this, the details for get joke. If I just scroll up here, it's telling ChatGPT how this API is structured and how to request jokes from it. So you got to wait for this to complete, and we see we also got to submit, which is how to send a joke to the joke API. So it's only got the 2 endpoints, and this is just something I mentioned briefly, but the data we gave to Actions GPT included quite a lot of endpoints. included ping, it employed get the formats, it included possible flags, supported language, and Actions GPT decided to ignore all of that. So if you want a comprehensive schema, especially with more complicated APIs, and even it failed with this one, you're either going to have to manually create your schema or hope that the API developer has started to include a detailed schema based on the OpenAI standard. But this should be enough. Hopefully we can get a joke and submit a joke, and it's more than we actually need right now. So I'm going to just paste this schema in here, tap format, and we see that it's picked out these two available actions for the jokester: get joke and submit joke. So if we hit test here, it's going to try and do this action, and we get the debug information during the testing. We get the question, do we want to allow interactions with this API? And we see we get this response information. I'll just hide the debug information for the moment, but we can dive into what the communication is between ChatGPT and the API. And it's received a response about the joke, and seems to have frozen. Sometimes you get this. Let's have a look. We actually have a joke here. We can see in the response information, and then ChatGPT has kind of ignored it. So we're just gonna actually ignore that it failed or is frozen here, because I can see the response was received correctly. Let's go up here. So we've added those two actions. Unfortunately, we can see that the response was received. We managed to call the endpoint, but ChatGPT is stuck in one of its loops. That doesn't mean we can't continue though. I just want to add something to the instructions here, which says all API requests to Joke API should be in safe mode, comma, and all jokes should be retrieved from the API. Full stop. Any explanations of jokes that are misunderstood should be wry and dry. So I'm just adding some extra details here to make sure that whenever we're creating jokes, we're not relying on ChatGPT itself. We're going to this third-party API. Okay, now let's try it out again. Tell me a dad joke. We're going to call the endpoint. Let me just disappear for a quick second. We've received the response. And this is interesting that we're failing out here in this debug mode. This might be an issue that's currently happening with ChatGPT, but never mind. I'm sure they'll eventually fix it. We can see we've received the joke from the API, so the request is happening. What I'm going to do now is actually save this, and we need a privacy policy. We'll just set it for only me for the moment. All right, and now let's try once again, now that we've published this. I'm just going to click always allow in case there's any issues with actions incompleting. And there we go. I visited my friend at his new house. He told me to make myself at home, so I threw him out. I hate visitors. Never date a baker. They're too needy. It's interesting because this API obviously provides us with a way to retrieve jokes. Unfortunately, there's no guarantees that these jokes will actually be funny. That's I guess too advanced for this API. So we go back to edit the GPT and just to see if allowing all of those requests has now solved this issue with the freezing. Now, as you'll know, we've asked to share a joke that's safe for work, but actually within our instructions, we've said that everything should be in safe mode. Okay, wow, we are sending a lot of requests here, which is interesting. You can go through these responses. Okay, wow. Okay, so one of those jokes was definitely not safe for work. And so the reason for all these requests was making sure the joke was safe for work. And yeah, some of the responses that were received were definitely unsafe by anybody's standard and pretty damn offensive. So we can see here, let's just go to safe mode. Yep, you are serving too many offensive jokes. And so we can just add the safe mode parameter to the URL. So I'm going to go back to the configuration screen here and configure the action. And then let's see. I'm just going to add this get joke. Just add this safe mode parameter into the URL. So let's save this and try a joke that's safe for work again. I'm going to always allow. That was the issue previously. And hopefully we'll do much fewer requests this time as we are using safe mode by default. Okay, so now we've kind of appended that safe mode permanently to the URL. Let's see if we can get a funny joke for a meeting that isn't extremely offensive. Okay, so we're now interacting with Joke API directly through our CustomGPT. So we've completed the integration, but I think there's some interesting things to note here is that CustomGPTs don't necessarily interact with the API in the ways we are expecting, in part because the schema we're creating for them might not be complete, especially if we're using Actions GPT to create the schema rather than having one made by the owners of the API. It seems to just focus on a few pathways it feels are important rather than be complete. So if you're interacting with a more complicated API, say Google Calendar or Trello or some more advanced, or something that has a create, an update, a read, a delete, rather than just a get joke function or submit joke function, you will need to do much more due diligence on are the behaviors you're expecting resulting from your interaction with your custom GPT. So it is a little finicky at the moment, but it is still impressive what can be done, and opens up a whole set of opportunities for you to manage more of your life, more of your business through ChatGPT as an interface. So let's just get another joke, but make sure it's funny. And so with this, finally, just to summarize, we are trying to finesse the interactions that ChatGPT is having with this API. It has an x-axis and a y-axis. And of course, ChatGPT had to tell me why the joke is funny. So as you can see, there's some way to go here, but try experimenting. There's lots of other APIs that you could explore. There's definitely a lot of people searching for finance APIs, weather APIs, people trying to experiment with day trading through ChatGPT as an interface. So yeah, that's the basics. As you get into other services, you also might need to do authentication either through your own API key or through using OAuth. Just be mindful that if you make a custom GPT with an API key public, you're going to be using your API key for everyone who is using your custom GPT. So with the Jokester here, happy to share that URL because there's no API key, there's no payment for using Joke API. But imagine that I was using a service such as Google Maps API, where I'm paying for every query that takes place. I would need to be quite careful about who I share that with, and maybe I don't even want to make it public, just only available to myself and my team. I'll send the link to the Jokester in the description, in the video description, and a link to some other resources that I used in putting this together. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comments and share with me any interesting APIs you've tried to integrate so far and any problems you've bumped into as well. All right, see you later.